Tucker Carlson gets to the bottom of the cold, hard truth behind Israel, Gaza, and Israeli aid to Hamas over the course of many years in this conversation with Qatar's prime minister. They also get into the subject of who Qatar's prime minister believes is culpable for Israel's decision to bomb Doha recently, and whether he puts any blame on the Trump administration. So let's get right into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
This country is being denounced as a terror state, terror financing, very high volume, lots of attacks, including from politicians, sitting U.S. senators, Ted Cruz, for example. And the main criticism seems to revolve around Hamas, and the idea is that your country, and you specifically, are supporters of Hamas, you're terror financiers. And I'd like to just get right to the truth of that. So my understanding is Hamas is here in Doha because the United States and Israel asked you to host Hamas. Is that true? And if not, what is the truth about Hamas in Doha?
Well, thank you, Tucker. First of all, look, the starting of the relationship with Hamas and the communication was started back more than 10 years, 13 years ago, at the request of the United States, even beyond that, like it was 19 years ago when they first participated in the election, and then when they moved their office back in 2012 here, it was used only for the communication and to facilitate like ceasefire, facilitating aids to Gaza. Now, unfortunately, Qatar has been attacked for having them here, but when you look, at what's happening within the region, this region, when you look at its conflict, it has the parties of the conflict. Sometimes they are state actors, sometimes they are non-state actors. If you have no one speaking to those non-state actors, how we are going to resolve or to reach to a solution at the end of the day? And now we have seen that this communication has led to ceasefires, has led to the release of the hostages, has led to alleviating the suffering of the people over there.
Excuse me, but none of the aid to Hamas alleviated the suffering of the people over there. That doesn't even make sense. And, if I was a Qatari citizen, I would put some blame on Qatar's government for facilitating these transfers of funds from Israel using Qatar as a middleman to Hamas over the course of time. That was part of Netanyahu's strategy to prop up Hamas. Many Americans don't know this, but he's on tape talking about it, saying we control the height of the flame, and, talking about the mantra in The Godfather that said, keep your enemies close, but your friends close, but your enemies closer. That's what the track record is. And there's culpability to go around on this. Netanyahu's a war criminal and a genocidal freak, but Qatar was willing to facilitate these transfers too. And no matter how anti-Israel or anti-state in general, people will call me pro-Qatar, but I think that he deserves some culpability from that, as do the previous administrations that were involved in those transfer of funds.
And unfortunately, there are like politicians who are trying to use this to score like short-term political gains to fuel their narratives. In order to using Qatar to blame another country for what's happening over there or for their wrong policies. All our aid and all our support and financing that went, and what they claimed that it went to Hamas, went to Gaza, went to the people, and it was under very transparent process that the United States is fully aware about. Israel is the one who's facilitating, and it's not one government, it was across governments. Netanyahu, Bennett, we have dealt with all the agencies. Lapid was a prime minister at a certain point of time. Mossad, Shin Bet, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, all of and the defense, all of them, they were involved. And
this is true. They were all involved, but this was an evil scheme to put money in the pockets of a terrorist organization. Netanyahu's grand strategy to prevent the Palestinian leadership from uniting and to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. So he's right. A lot of people do pin this on Qatar, and that's wrong because Israel was the main driver of this policy. But Qatari processes in this entire cycle were involved in facilitating it too, because Israel first tried to get involved in transferring the money directly to Hamas, and Israeli banks didn't want to be complicit in that kind of thing. There'd be too much of a paper trail that shows their absurd policy that's propping up a terrorist regime, and you have one of the main Israeli banks, or several of them, helping in that regard. This was a process that went through a long span of time, many years, over $1 billion in transfers, and it's not just about pinning it on Qatar. It's that everyone involved in this is to blame, including Qatar and Israel. It's, why we're spending so much money in this genocide in Gaza now because of it. It backfired in the most heinous way.
In these aids and the delivery of those aids. So today, when they are claiming that this is the financing of Qatar to Hamas, it has no basis. It's just a way to spread this information about a country that doesn't do anything for them, but it's doing things that are against their policies. If you just go to Qatar records with in its engagement with the United States for the last 20 years or 30 years, Qatar has never went to the United States and encouraging them to bomb this country or to support this group or to that group. We've been always in our dialogues with the United States about how we de-escalate the region, how we bring peace to the region, and this peace cannot happen without an engagement with everyone in the region.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally true. All the Zionists will tell you about the incredible influence Qatar has on the government and our government's foreign policy, but it's just nonsense. We don't follow the lead of the Pied Pipers in Doha. Unfortunately, a criminal regime in the United States follows the Pied Pipers in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. That's the unfortunate fact. But again, Qatar was involved in this process. Israel and the Likud and the ones trying to prevent peace in the region and embrace the Greater Israel Project and the clean break strategy were the drivers of it too.
Well, I'm confused then. If you hosted Hamas here and sent money to Gaza, both of those things at the request of the U.S. government and the Israeli government, successive Israeli governments, why did Israel bomb your country?
Well, I don't know if there is... I don't know if any of the actions that's been or many of the actions that's been taken been justified or rationalized or even were ethical actions. But in a principle, even you have a mediator. The concept of mediation is like a safe place for the conflicted parties to achieve a deal, to end wars and to end conflicts, and to have the mediator being bombed by one of the parties of the conflict. This has been unprecedented, and I have said that many times, that this is, it's not only an unethical move, it's just, throwing everything against the wall, throwing the international law, throwing the respect of the sovereignty of any other country. Besides, ethically, it's not really acceptable, or no one can swallow it.
No.
Yeah, but that's the point. If I was a Qatari citizen, again, I'd be complaining to my government that, hey, you're saying it's unacceptable, but what are you doing to stop it? You're not criticizing the Trump administration or the United States for using no leverage to get Israel to stop. What did they do? There's just this stupid theatrical stunt where they got Netanyahu to get on the phone with the Qatari government and say, oh, I'm sorry for bombing the peace negotiators. I'm sorry for bombing a U.S. ally. And by the way, the United States would never allow Israel to be bombed without reprisals, of course, and the United States just joins along with every preferred war that Israel wants the United States to get into. But this guy is talking like it's unacceptable and unprecedented, and that's all true, but that's all talk. There's been no pressure on the United States that I can tell to do that, and you might say it's impossible to leverage pressure on the United States, but if I was a head of state, I could do more than just say, it's unacceptable, but we're not doing anything to stop that. We're going to still continue to have the U.S. Air Base in Doha. We're not going to ruffle any feathers over this when your country was bombed by Israel. Just insane. It's a weird position to be in, being in Qatar, but at the same time, there's, no pushback, really. That's crazy to me. That's a lack of sovereignty on the part of Qatari citizens toward their government, which is a government, so it's criminal in a certain degree, too, just like ours and Israel's.
And the aftermath was also unprecedented. So President Trump basically told the Israelis to apologize to you. He took your side. He took the side of an Arab country against Israel in this specific case.
Did he, though?
I don't think I've
Did he?
ever seen that before. I don't think it's ever happened before. What was your reaction to that?
Well, of course, President Trump was very clear from the beginning since the attack. Actually, when he was informed about the attack, he assigned one of his advisors to reach out to us. And at the same time, he called His Highness after the attack, and he expressed his frustration, his disappointment from such a thing that's happening by Israel, because he knows everything about the process and he knows how helpful we were throughout this process. And this kind of move was shocking for him as a partner in these efforts and these endeavors to achieve peace in Gaza. And at that time, actually, when the strike happened, it was happening while we were trying to convince Hamas to accept the offer was made by President Trump at that time, to convince them to engage, to convince them to get a deal before the 20 points being developed when the attack happened.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. It was happening during peace negotiations. Those were peace delegations trying to sort out peace in a region that's been ransacked by genocide, mass starvation, killings, and torture. That's what it was. But did Trump really side with Qatar? Well, that was all an illusion. There was just this spectacle, and you saw like a little press conference. I think the media covered it, the call with Netanyahu in the Oval Office with Trump, giving Qatar's government a call. But there's no ramifications in terms of policy. What kind of reins are being put on Israel for this injustice, for slaughtering innocent people in a country that's ostensibly a U.S. ally? Well, in the hierarchy of U.S. allies to the war machine, Israel always comes first. And Israel always comes first in U.S. foreign policy. So is Trump really siding with Qatar on that? I don't think so. If he was really siding with Qatar, he'd say no more aid to Israel. But of course he can't do that because of how much the Israel lobby controls this administration and Congress as well.
So you're saying that President Trump was surprised by the bombing of Doha by the Israelis. Of course, it was his peace process that was short-circuited by their bombing using American money. You're saying that the president didn't know that was going to happen. He was surprised.
He called us right away. His advisors who reached out to us, they reached out to us just a couple of minutes before the attack, which was like the attack was already happening. So it was very clear demonstration with all the actions that this is something happened against his will. And he doesn't accept it, and he made it very clear for everyone that this is like a red line, that he doesn't want anyone to cross it, and we highly value that and appreciate it.
Well, but just think of that, though. In some ways, it's worse if Trump wasn't involved and hadn't been alerted to the Israelis. Of course, that would be bad, too, if Trump was involved. But what does that say? Just think about that for a second. If Trump wasn't aware of this Israeli strike on Qatar, that means that Israel didn't think that they even needed to inform Trump, the United States president, that's bankrolling their rogue regime before doing this. Something that obviously killed or risked killing a large number of people and derailed his ostensible peace process, the peace process he was trying to work out. And you're saying Israel's government didn't even think to alert him on that? We're just going to bomb them? But they can do that because they know that Trump will always side with them. So in some ways, it's just a slap in the face of Americans that he didn't know, and Israel just gets away with it.
And I'm just pressing you on this because there were news accounts in the subsequent days, the next day, the day after, in Israel saying, no, the Israeli government did this, the prime minister did this, with the agreement of Donald Trump. This was part of Donald Trump's plan, was to bomb Doha, bomb his own peace negotiations. And you're saying that's not true.
Well, I think this is one of many efforts to sabotage the relationship between Qatar and the United States, and they want us to believe that. And I think that These efforts are not new to us. We have seen a lot of efforts ongoing for years now on, based on disinformation and spreading lies and false information about Qatar in order to hurt the relationship between Qatar and the United States, which we see it from our perspective as mutually beneficial for both countries. Because we advocate for something different than what our adversaries advocate. Our adversaries advocating for escalation, for bombing, for controlling, but we advocate for resolving conflict in a diplomatic way, trying to stabilize the region, and that has been Qatar policy since inception.
Yeah, well, I hate to tell you that's not exactly the policy of the United States, because the policy of the United States is always more interventions, always more escalations, always more regime change operations on the part of Israel. So that might be your plan, but it's not your allies in the United States. And if the United States is supporting you right now, just like they supported Iraq in the Iran-Iraq war, they supported, the Mujahideen against the Soviets, they supported ISIS in Syria. It's going to bite you in the ass at some point, just giving you the spoiler alert to this movie, by the way. And at some point, Trump has sabotaged relations with all powers, regardless of what side he was in on this. If he was in on the bombing, then what does that show? It says duplicity against a U.S. ally that isn't Israel. Or if he didn't know about it, that Israel didn't feel the need to inform him and then just gets away with it anyways. That's what it telegraphs. It's sabotage on the part of the Trump administration, not really people questioning this, I would say.
So you said that your country has sent money to Gaza for humanitarian reasons. That's your position. Basically paying to help the people who are being bombed by Israel. Now there's the question of who rebuilds Gaza, which has, of course, been completely destroyed, and who pays for it. And I just imagine with total certainty that you will be asked to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. Why would you do that? Why would you rebuild a region that's been destroyed by a country that also bombed you?
Well, look, Tucker, here, there is like a very let's say like an ironic situation when you look at like two conflicts happening at the same time, and you are hearing like many about when it comes to the Russia-Ukrainian conflict that Russia should fund all the reconstruction and their assets should be seized to fund all the reconstruction of Ukraine, while when you are talking about Gaza and Israel flattened this land, and you say that Israel has the responsibility to rebuild what it's destroyed, they will tell you no, you will have, as a region, you will have the responsibility to do so. And it's really very ironic double standards when you look at it. From our side, as a state of Qatar, we will continue supporting the Palestinian people. We will do whatever to alleviate their suffering. But we are not the ones who are going to write the check to rebuild what others destroys. That's basically our position. But also we will not let the Palestinian people at dry if they are not helped or they are not funded.
And just think about that. He's much more Qatar first in that respect than our United States president is America first. He doesn't want to devote unlimited resources to destruction. He only wants to aid in peace in this regard. I think there's plenty of criticism toward him, as I've already levied it toward him in this video, by the way. But at the same time, Qatar is part of the Arab Peace Initiative and the Arab Accords, that some people call it, in 2002, that came down with a plan. It's a pretty simple plan that called for normalizing relationships with the Arab states and Israel. But as part of that deal, also, in addition to that, there would be a Palestinian state living side by side with the Israeli state that would be supported. Qatar views this as in the interest of the region to eliminate suffering and hostility and, of course, genocide that's going on right now. Qatar has been very supportive of the Palestinians. I think rightly so. They're the most beleaguered and poor and downtrodden people in the world. I just can't imagine their suffering. And, why would Qatar have to pay for the follies of the United States and the indiscretions? And that's putting it lightly. It's just the genocidal engine of the U.S. war machine and the Israeli war machine.
I should say, from an American perspective, it's even more grotesque. So you are asked to pay for the destruction and for the rebuilding. This is like, it's a little much. So, but you're saying clearly that your country will not pay to rebuild what Israel destroyed.
That's our position. Our position is that our payments will go only to help the Palestinian people if we see that the help is coming to them is insufficient. That's basically our position.
Well, great. As far as I see it, he's 1 out of 3 in these questions. Number 1, Qatar deserves some culpability for aiding Hamas. Yes, Israel was the prime driver of that. They deserve the most blame for that. Netanyahu boasted about how this was some grand 4D chess strategy. This was the Israeli form of 4D chess, the unmanifested genius that a lot of Trump supporters always say is coming and never does. Always the 4D chess is actually just played on his base, rather than against the war regime or the deep state. That's the truth. This guy's wrong about that. The Qatari government was complicit with these money transfers that went to propping up Hamas and ensuring a destabilized Palestinian front. Also, if you're a Qatari first and you want to not have your sovereignty slapped out of you by Israel, you would push back against Israel and against the United States for doing nothing to exert any leverage or put any additional controls or restrictions on the Israeli government after they bombed Doha. The whole thing was a spectacle. Netanyahu's apology did nothing to change policy, and now you have a long-lasting precedent that, hey, if you just bomb one of Israel's neighboring countries that's relatively adjacent to Israel, that's just fine. Because guess why? The United States is captured by Israel much more than Qatar, no matter how many Zionists want to tell you otherwise. And on the third point, he's just right. Qatar shouldn't have to pay for the genocide in Gaza that is being perpetrated by essentially solely the United States and Israel. And I don't think that crisis has reached a halt. We're in a ceasefire, but I think over 200, maybe 250 people have died since that ceasefire began. And the ceasefire doesn't even address any of the root causes of that conflict. It doesn't talk about a Palestinian state. It enacts a redevelopment regime for Gaza to build the Gaza on the Riviera and places Trump in a commission with Jared Kushner and Tony Blair to do that. They seem much more concerned about economic redevelopment and getting hand-picked, politically connected contractors to get in there and benefit from it than they do actually establishing peace, because that's all the war machine is. It's a lucrative wealth transfer to the bomb makers and the military-industrial complex at the expense to all of us. What do we get for that? We don't get stronger United States. We don't get a stronger military. We don't get a stronger presence in the world. What we get is debt destruction, the curtailment of civil liberties, a divided populace at each other's throats over this, where half the populace is telling you you're anti-Semitic if you happen to criticize Israel. And that's what you get. A new culture war in the United States, debt, catastrophe, entangling alliances, and it's really the unentangling of any sufficient limited government republic. You can't have a limited world empire. It's always unlimited. You can either have a limited constitutional republic or an empire, and to give up the empire, you have to give up all these war escapades. That's what we have. So what do you guys think? Do you think that I'm right about this? Who is right here? Is Tucker Carlson right about how he portrays Trump and this strike, whether Trump is in on it or not? What do you think about Qatar's prime minister? Is he right about the Hamas wire transfers? And is he right about the bombing and what he should do or how he should act on behalf of his people afterward? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. And if you like this video, please consider supporting the channel. You can do that by clicking the join button below. Joining as a member will give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to view all those members-only videos right away if you do, and I really appreciate that. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll send you out to a website. You just plug in your email in the box at the top, and I'll shoot you a free PDF copy of that book, free of charge, no obligation, just because I appreciate you watching. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.
What did they accuse you of doing wrong? Had you called for armed insurrection against the Starmer government, or what was their claim?
No, I don't even believe in that, never mind call for it. And so here I am, sitting in a police station in Gatwick Airport with armed men questioning me on my political views. I'm not saying this because I hate Britain,
Yes.
but because I love it.
There's an attack on free speech in the West, and it most commonly manifests right now in Britain, where people are either being detained or jailed for free speech violations. They said the wrong thing, the thing that the government didn't want them to say. And the latest is George Galloway, a former MP. He's 70 years old, was recently detained ostensibly because of his political views, not being in compliance with what the English authorities wanted. Well, this could be a harbinger for things to come in the United States, so Tucker talks to him about it. So let's check that out. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
George Galloway, thank you very much for doing this. I'm sitting in London, in the city of London right now. I'm an American. You're a citizen of the country I'm sitting in, but you're not in this country. You're in another country. Why are you there, and when are you coming back?
Well, it's a long and difficult story. It started last month when my good wife and I were detained but not arrested by the anti-terrorism police at Gatwick Airport in London. Now, ponder that piece of Kafkaesque framing. You are not under arrest, but you are not free to leave, they said. These pistol-packing anti-terrorist cops. They said you have no right to silence, and if you refuse to answer any of our questions, you will automatically be guilty under the Terrorism Act of an act in defiance of that very serious act. And the policeman joked, good luck ever getting on an airplane again. Now, to complete the framing, I'm 71 years old, 7 times elected Member of Parliament, a member of the British Parliament across 5 decades, the leader of a British political party, the biggest broadcaster in Britain, not nearly as big as you, but the biggest British broadcaster in Britain, broadcasting to the largest audience every single week. I'm one of the best known people in the country, and I've got armed anti-terrorist police telling me I'm not under arrest, but I am not free to leave. And of course, it quickly turned out that the purpose of the pull, the detention, was speech. My podcasts, my broadcasts, my tweet output, my Facebook output. That's the Britain that we now have today.
Yeah, isn't that sick and twisted and so ironic when it comes to the fact that in many ways the legal precedents that ended up in defining free speech as an integral part of the West and Western values, Western individual rights come from Britain? That this was based on a long series of precedents. Man, of course, has the right to speak naturally, but this was codified into the English Bill of Rights as a repudiation against James II, who was trying to deny that right to Protestants and enact a Catholic-based regime. And there was a bloodless revolution essentially to overthrow him. It was called the Glorious Revolution of 1688. And that's why, in many ways, we have this defining precedent that the United States patriots, the United States founding fathers, built upon. That the fact that we do have free speech as a result of natural law, as a result of our creator, but we're going to codify that constitutionally. Well, they're violating this. And he is the leader of a party. He's the leader of the Workers' Party in Britain, a long-term MP. He does have a podcast. And guess what? He calls for peace. And that's about the most big cardinal sin that you can do these days, calling for peace. He opposes Israel. He opposes NATO and the US and the UK's war, the proxy war versus Russia. And for that, they're trying to detain him. It's, a horrifying prospect that this could leak into the United States and play a role here too.
And we spent 4 hours in my case, 5 hours in my wife's case, in 2 separate rooms, surrounded by armed police officers, being questioned about our political views. And in my wife's case, her fingernail, which is painted rather nicely in the Palestine colors. Now, if you had told me 8 weeks ago that such a thing was even remotely possible, I would not have believed you. There is no more patriotic British citizen than me. In the last decade, Mr. Carlson, I fought 2 major battles for the British state. 2014, The Spectator said, my speeches saved the Union, when Scotland's separatist referendum looked very much like it was going to succeed. And 2016, I was one of the leading figures in the Brexit movement, trying to win Britain's independence. And so here I am, sitting in a police station in Gatwick Airport with armed men questioning me on my political views.
And that's all it takes. If you support any kind of secession, as Brexit was, peaceful secession from the European Union, that was supported by a narrow majority of the English populace. But when it was, you didn't hear all this clamor among the forces that are so keen to defend democracy in every case say, hey, well, I guess democracy spoke. No, there was a concerted effort to try to push that back, and you had heroes like George Galloway and Nigel Farage that saved that prospect for Britain. I think we could use a little bit of that sentiment in the United States now with a Leviathan federal government that tries to commandeer the states and reign as an oligarchy above 330 million people. But George is put in this situation because he wants peace. How ironic is that when they'll make you president or prime minister when you support wars, but try to end one and they'll paint you as a supervillain. They'll pretend you're an enemy of the state, persona non grata, that should be detained for your political views. Just think of that.
So the trauma of all that, to be honest, being outside of the country is the least of it. If I tell you, and nobody knows this except you and me and whoever watches, it literally broke my heart. I now have a cardiologist. I'm a man who never lost a day through illness at work in my entire life. And now I have a heart condition, arrhythmia, which the consultant cardiologist, a very fine one, tells me is of recent provenance. So you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to work out that these cops actually broke my heart.
First of all, let me just commend you for your very long string of good calls. You were against the Iraq War, you were against Scottish secession, and you were for Brexit. So I don't think there are many people who can say they were right in all three. But I'm confused as to why a 70-year-old former member of parliament would be considered a terror threat. And what was the pretext for doing this to you? Do you know?
Well, the Terror Act, through which I sat in its passage and opposed it every line, precisely because of the possibility of its abuse in this kind of way, allows the police to seize your documents, seize your telephone, your laptop, seize everything, only at the port. They would need a warrant to do it anywhere else in the country, and they'd be very unlikely to get one in regard to me. But they saw the opportunity of stopping me under that act and divesting me of my whole life.
And just think of how sickening that is. And he's not the only one. He's a prominent person, and I'm glad it's being covered because of his prominence. You do this to a prominent person, it's going to get a lot more coverage. But there are viral videos going around on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram of people being questioned by the authorities in Britain for this. The bastion of free speech. The birthplace of, constitutional free speech in so many regards, where this is happening. And then you had Democrats in the last election cycle calling for more policing of disinformation on the internet, taking after Britain. You had Kamala Harris and AOC and Tim Walz and Hillary Clinton doing that. And now you have Republicans trying to crack down on free speech as it pertains to Israel. If you're a critic of Israel, you won't have the same speech rights, say, in terms of receiving federal disaster relief. That story came up, a few months ago. This is a potential big issue that could set a precedent if it seeps into the United States. You could have a Ministry of Truth literally prosecuting these crimes in a way that's so senseless and anti-American, it's hard to even portray it accurately as, how egregious that would be.
Everything, my parliamentary correspondence, my legal correspondence, my personal family pictures, my political correspondence, the members of my party, the membership list of my party, and they took it. And this is precisely the abuse of the word terrorism that you saw in London yesterday, where old ladies, old men, people in wheelchairs, blind people are being arrested under the Terrorism Act for holding up a placard, a little piece of cardboard at their breast, and they are being taken away under terrorism charges. This is the nightmare that is Britain. Your stature will definitely not be a cause for your being huckled in the way that I was. You are a very big global figure. They wouldn't dare to touch you to get your telephone, to get your laptop. But if they could even do it to me, then I ask you to ponder just who would be safe in Britain from that.
Wow, I mean, that is true. If they'll go after this prominent former MP, they will go after you. They certainly will. And this is based off the Terrorism Act of 2000 in Britain. It's also called Martin's Law, that was enacted to kind of fight against terror. It was part of, the grand war on terror drive that we saw in the United States, too, that brought us the Patriot Act and the DHS and, 20 plus year occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. We got the surveillance state expanding broadly during that time frame. They'll always take these precedents that are left in a legal context and then apply them internally to dissidents. They said that this was only for terrorism. Well, they're going after George Galloway now. And guess what? Me and George have a lot of differences in things like economics, but I don't care. He's a hero for standing against this, for standing for free speech when so many of his fellow Britons, especially in the political class, will not fight for it. Not whatsoever. And will they not fight for it? Not only will they not, they'll drive in this absurd prosecution campaign against dissidents to completely annihilate free speech.
So, to complete my answer to your first question, I'm not going back to Britain until I know that that will not happen again, not least because of the health problem that it has given me after the first time. And they will not give me an assurance that it will not happen again. And if you think about it, why would it not happen again? Because it happened because of my broadcasts and the fact that the British state and the Stumer, Keir Starmer, who leads it for the moment, at least, don't like what I say on my podcast. Well, I'm still broadcasting every Sunday and Wednesday, and I still have the same point of view.
Amen. That's the attitude we all need to have. That's incredible. I love that response by him.
So there's no guarantee whatsoever that the same thing wouldn't happen to me again. My wife couldn't sleep or eat for weeks after it. She's already thin. She lost 10 pounds nearly in weight as a result of the trauma of this occasion. We knew that it had happened to other people, but we didn't think that we would be regarded as other people because of the position I have over 50 years in politics in Great Britain. But it did happen, and it could happen again.
What did they accuse you of doing wrong? Had you called for armed insurrection against the Starmer government, or what was their claim?
No, I don't even believe in that. Never mind call for it. I believe in democracy. I believe in freedom of speech. That's the problem. We are governed by a prime minister and a pygmy cabinet, which rubber stamps every cockamamie scheme he has to take us into war with Russia. Now, I don't want to go to war with Russia, not for Russia's sake, but for Britain's sake, for the sake of the British people whose blood and treasure would be burned, and the British people whose country might disappear into cinders and ash.
Yeah, so just listen to that. Because he wants to avoid a war with a nuclear power and he opposes censorship, that's why they detained him. That's why they questioned him. That's why they put his family, including his wife, through all this turmoil. And think of that. Think of that potential. And then the fact that some people want to unleash this hellscape in America. And it's just too absurd, man. It's just too anti-American. It's just too senseless. And just completely outside of the principles of the best things that we hold dear in our society.
Underneath their feet, if such a war were to take place. So the proximate reason, insofar as one can glean it from 4 hours of circumlocution, is that I oppose the British government's policy towards Russia. Now, I might be right on that. I might be wrong on that. But as John Stuart Mill points out, if you deny a point of view the right to be heard, the loser is not the person with that point of view,
Yes.
but the rest of us.
Yeah, so think of that. This Terrorism Act of 2000, used to try to safeguard Britain from terrorist threats, is being wielded against anti-war dissidents like George Galloway for opposing war with Russia. Think about that. And if that law can be so arbitrarily applied to heroes like George Galloway, just think of what they'll do to eliminate dissent towards wars in the future. If he goes down for this, if they can detain him and that becomes a precedent, and guess what? If someone goes further beyond that and says, don't sign up for conscription because of this, like they tried to ban during World War I in the United States, the Espionage Act, they'll push it even further. They'll keep pushing and pushing and pushing until we're all the enemy. We're all the terrorists. And that's exactly what the deep state does to try to ruin our lives. We saw it with the War on Terror. This has been used for FBI entrapment schemes in the United States. In January 6th, the Whitmer kidnapping plot, the bridge plot in Ohio. It happens time and time again.
Because we will not hear what might actually turn out to have been good advice. But that's not the way these social democrats, Christian Democrats, all across Europe, have put the lights out on freedom of speech, lights out on democracy. They're interfering in elections. They're canceling other people's elections. They are throttling free and independent media. They are bankrolling stooge media to try and crowd it out. They are threatening the social media platforms with sanction and even closure if they don't kowtow to the prevailing orthodoxy. And I'm afraid Britain is in the vanguard of all of that. And I make this point. I'm not saying this because I hate Britain,
Yes.
but because I love it. It is an ache for me to be outside of my country all of this time. I have children there. I have a house there. I have a very keen addiction to the English Premiership in football, soccer, you call it. I'm torn from all of that. I'm torn from my family and friends. So it's a dull ache for me. But it's not as painful as another armed arrest by the anti-terrorism squad would be. So for the time being, it looks like my wife and I are around the world in 80 days. And
Yeah, I mean, George is a real hero, if you ask me. He is a guy that stands on the best principles of his society, that his society was once known for. These individual rights, individual liberties had been denied. Kings had violated them all the time. The Stuarts, certainly, Charles I, King John, Henry VIII. Of course, there were kings that violated the most sacred precepts of England, but those sacred precepts, which recognize natural law, are things that he is defending, in contradiction to his government that wants to punish him for this. Detain him, stop him from conducting his affairs, and who cares what kind of ramifications that has on his family. He's not the youngest spring chicken, and his wife is suffering over this more than him, it seems like. But I'm so glad that he's doubling down. He's not apologizing. He's saying this is why it happened, and I'm still broadcasting. I love that part. That unapologetic attitude is the attitude that will save the West. It will save both Britain and the United States. And really the only thing I disagreed with what he said is, you know, if I was a Brit, I would probably support the secession of Scotland for the same reason that if I'm an American, I would support the secession of California. That would be beneficial for both parties in both countries. You know, fair enough if he doesn't have that perspective, and to some extent it doesn't matter because I'm not British. But at the same time, the Scots are more socialist leaning. They don't have, you know, my same general attitudes toward those subjects. As far as I see it, they can secede peacefully. That's what I would want for places in the United States that would not want to be controlled by Washington, including California, and it would benefit them for leaving if they are so distraught by the way things operate in Washington. Same thing with Texas. I don't care about the political leanings. I think that would be beneficial to all parties to some extent. But at the same time, everything else I totally agree with. And it doesn't really matter to some extent because, like I said, I'm not British. But George Galloway is really a hero, man. And he is just one of those dissident guys that's so interesting. A lot of Americans don't know who that is. But he's a really interesting guy with pretty, you know, conservative-leaning proclivities, but also, you know, he's an open socialist, and he's anti-war, but he's also very pro-free speech. The kind of politician that you just don't see in the United States at all. He really is kind of an aberration in Britain, too, but this is just horrifying. This cannot serve as a harbinger for the United States. We cannot allow these draconian free speech laws to go into effect and just propagandize them as if it's saving the United States, providing security. We can't emulate this pattern. It's destroying Britain. It so clearly is. And I'm so glad in a way that this is being exposed because of the George Galloway story. Hate the fact that he was detained, but thankfully this is getting more coverage than I think it's ever gotten. So thanks, George and Tucker. Great interview segment. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel too. And please subscribe to Tucker. This is an awesome segment, like I said. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a precursor to what we're likely to see in the United States, regardless of who runs our country or who's elected in 2028 or otherwise? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, like I said. And also, if you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to see those members-only videos right away. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. I'll shoot that out to you in PDF form, right to your email. No cost, no obligation, just because you're awesome for watching my channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.